Welcome to Movie Bounce with Mike and Harry, where we'll bounce from movie to movie.
From actor, writer, director, any which way.
Who knows where we'll bounce to next? Hi, everybody. It's Mike here, and welcome to Movie Bounce. And with me today is Harry.
Hey everyone, how's it going?
Hey, this is the intro to the first episode, and to give everyone a little bit of a background, Harry and I actually texted Harry back in June of 2020. Maybe it might have been May, and I said, you know what, we're all isolated here, in the under the quarantine, and we always genuinely love talking about movies. Well, we like to watch movies generally. Whether you and our other friends come over, we watch a movie at my place, something I put on my queue where I'm like, you guys, you've got to watch this movie, and we have a blast. Couldn't do that during the quarantine, but always love hearing what you think. And we can't really do that now. I mean, we've done the whole, you can watch it through the cloud, and we're talking on the phone as we watch it. It's good, it's just not the same, but here's a great outlet for us to talk about movies. Now, I think the beauty part is that, reaching out to you, Harry, it was always like I'm a movie enthusiast, and I think we should be very, very upfront with everyone. We're not movie critics here. But I think I'm a movie enthusiast, but I always seen you as kind of like a movie unenthusiast, because movies aren't the number one thing, like one of your big things you look forward to at the end of the week and you want to dive right into. Some for people, a lot of TV, books. So yeah, give us a little, first of all, an intro in terms of what you really love above movies.
Yeah, well, I'm smiling from ear to ear because and I will cop to, I'm not a movie enthusiast. I'm not a movie buff per se. I do enjoy watching movies. And when we were brainstorming this podcast, I did a quick back of the envelope calculation. And you and I have watched about 115 movies together. So despite not being a movie buff, you and I have watched a ton of movies together.
Right.
And that doesn't even include the ones that I've watched on my own or with other people. But as you mentioned, yeah, it's not like my greatest passion where, that I think you're going to bring that to the episodes, which is great. You're going to bring the knowledge and the passion. For me, I like a lot of the other arts. So I'm really passionate about music. I love art in terms of artwork, painting, sculpture, performance art, things of that nature. I like video games a lot too. So anyway, I think a lot of these things are similar in that it takes a lot of creativity, a lot of hard work, a lot of ingenuity and inventiveness. So, I do appreciate what movies can bring, and I do bring a particular eye to it that I would bring to a record or a piece of art or painting, what have you. So, hopefully it'll be interesting to people, and hopefully I could bring a fresh perspective.
Well, the interesting thing I find is that when we bring this up, you bring up the number, the fact that we've seen 115 movies together. But then again, we've also known each other since kindergarten. So some people might think, yeah, the number might be low, but because it took us a while to actually watch movies to go, oh, let's check this movie out in the theater, especially given the fact that, like you said, it's not you'd rather go to a museum or, it wasn't on the forefront in your mind at the end of the week.
But I want to throw it out there, and I'll have you clarify, because the first movie that we've seen together in theaters, it was either Toy Story or Copland. It's probably Toy Story, right? And then Copland.
I don't even.
It
would have to be Toy Story. The timeline,
Yeah, exactly.
Toy Story. That's December 1995. Right. Copland was August 1997. And yes, that would be it. Toy Story would be the movie in a really bad theater.
Yeah, and I'm just going through the list that I just pecked out real quick in a spreadsheet, and it's just really funny to see all of the titles that we've watched together.
And that was your second viewing of Toy Story, from what I recall.
I'm sorry?
That was your second viewing of Toy Story.
Yeah, I think I saw it with my sister or my family or something, and then we all saw it together.
Right.
Back in the day, it was an exciting thing for us to do because I think we were still rather young.
And I remember you recommending it, and it was my first viewing. I'm like, I hope Harry's right about this Toy Story movie. Hopefully it's going to be a good time. Right. And I had to convince you for Copland, I believe, because I think it was between that and Event Horizon. Yes. And luckily we made the better choice. I still, to this day, say that although Copland wasn't the film that I expected it to be, I still have a lot of affection for it. But and I also saw Event Horizon since, which I don't think you have seen. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I haven't. I lobbied hard for us to see that movie, and we didn't. And I'll probably never see it again, or never see it. I think the window of opportunity has passed.
You know, it was Lawrence Fishburne that year. You also had Hoodlum that came out that same month. I also saw
Oh, that's
that,
right.
and I do like. I think Event Horizon has through the years gotten a little bit more. His a fan base is really kind of built from that movie. I think, especially compared to the science fiction movies that come out today. I mean, if you compare it to the remake of Ghost in the Shell, well, Event Horizon blows that out of the water. So it's fascinating how that film has kind of grown throughout the years, and people have learned to appreciate it. As flawed as that movie is, directed by the man who directed Mortal Kombat and the Resident Evil movies. But anyway, yeah, like I think
Yeah, we're
Copland.
getting ahead of ourselves.
Yes, I mean this is how we bounce. We bounce from movie to movie, like you said in the title. And let's talk about how we came about to. Well, here's one thing before we go about how we come into the title. What I wanted to say is, again, as much as you say that you do have an appreciation for movies, going back from when we were together in grade school, man, you slammed a lot of movies, and that's the thing. I think that you say you had a lot of appreciation, but earlier on, when you were like a kid, it was more like, this movie sucks. It's not that good.
I
So
slam movies
you,
today,
you,
but I'm saying if I like a movie, then I like a movie, and I will really. So I think you'll find those who stick it out and listen to a couple episodes. If there's a movie that I like, I will definitely gush over it. And if it doesn't impress me, then I will just be completely frigid towards it.
Right. So you're going out guns blazing on these movies that definitely are missed the mark for you. And I think the key thing, the thing is, even the movies we disagree on as well as the movies we do agree on, we're always having a fascinating conversation. That's what's the audience should be excited about. I mean, actually, the only thing is I got to say for us, we've done multiple episodes so far. We've grown quite a bit. I mean, I think at first we were coming up. I think we were dressed formally to that podcast, even though we were in remote locations or something like that. I feel like we were, but we've grown already since. But how we came about the title of the podcast, we didn't know when we started talking about movies in the first, second, third episode. We didn't even have a title. It was more of like we were thinking, all right, we'll just keep giving our opinions on these movies, as some of them we were watching during the quarantine, others we'd watched previously and figured what it'd be good to talk about. But then as we went on, we realized that we were bouncing from movie to movie like one would do if you, for instance, watch a movie on Friday night, and it's a John Travolta movie. It could be Pulp Fiction, right? You watch Pulp Fiction, you go, this is a really good movie, and afterwards you had a blast, and then the person you're with says, oh, Travolta was in another kind of gangster movie, Get Shorty, maybe we should check out that tomorrow night or something. So you kind of bounce from movie to movie based off an actor, director, whoever it would be. And that's where, as we kept going through the movies, we found a certain rhythm. It could be the premise of the movie, whatever it would be, that we're like, okay, we're organically bouncing from movie to movie. And that's how we ended up with the title, Movie Bounce. And also how as we've gone through these podcasts, they've gotten more and more fun. So hopefully the audience will have a whole lot of fun with us as we grow. And I think the thing is I want to go back to quickly is I know you mentioned and we talked a little bit in terms of, your opinion on movies when you were a kid, but what was your first movie that you remember watching as a kid, if you can remember it?
Watching as a kid, like in the theater or at home?
Either one. Actually, do both.
The first movie I saw in theaters was the Chipmunks movie. And I
That
don't
was a movie?
remember. Yeah, it was an anime. It was like the Chipmunk Adventure. It was
Okay.
1987. And
Okay.
that is definitely like the first movie that I remember watching in the theater. And I'm almost 100% certain it was the first one I've seen in theaters. And then just the one at home, that's going to be like Pee-wee's Big Adventure or one of the Star Wars, perhaps. Or
Hmm.
like Follow That Bird, the Sesame Street movie. Pretty sure
Okay.
like it could have been any of those. But what about you? What about at least your first home viewing memory?
Well, I wish I could comment on it. I didn't even know there was a Chipmunks movie. I do remember Pee Wee's Big Adventure. I did watch that on video. It wasn't my first, though. I think, well, my first theatrical experience, I'm sure it's not officially it, and I just don't, the first that I could remember would be Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And that is,
Okay,
and when you think about that,
great flick to have as like one of your early memories.
And also some terrifying memories that you just can't wash away. I mean, there's a sequence where Doctor Doom sticks an animated boot into what is that? That acid? That barrel of
Oh,
what
like
was it
yeah, like
called?
it's like the eraser stuff or something. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
remember, but yeah,
horrifying. So for that to be a first movie, and then you've seen that animated thing, like it makes eyes like, please stop pouring me in this thing. I'm being wiped away from existence.
right.
And it was like for a kid seeing that, it was like, oh my god, what are movies? It's terrifying. And then Doctor Doom at the end, when those eyes are bulging out, it's
Yeah, yeah,
really
that's every
heavy,
child's kind of terrifying memory of that
right?
movie for
So,
sure.
so as a kid, I'm like, this is what movies are like. This is what the experience is like. And then of course, movies aren't as it's surprisingly still to this day there hasn't been many movies that hit those notes. And to some degree, there's a bit of trauma from that. I guess I don't know because I think that because yeah, that's interesting because I don't think many movies really have. Or maybe it's just because I did see it so young. It's still to this day, if I watch it, I'm like, man, that's really over the top. That's really sinister. But I think
Well,
that the
Toy
thing
Story
is,
3
yes,
has some
that's right.
pretty traumatic
What's the
moments.
bear's name? Yeah, so they're
Oh,
leaving the
lots.
incinerator. Right. So
Yeah,
that's an
or when
example.
when they're all kind of holding hands and they know that like their lives are almost over. Like I mean, there's some heavy
Yeah.
stuff going on there, but
Yeah, but those are rare. I feel like they're more rare than anything. I think that since 1988 and such, like they've gotten a little bit more. It's been Lion King, it's been Toy Story, and then they haven't as been as hard hitting as Zemeckis, as had hit us. But I have to say that I think that the thing is, in terms of the first movie I've ever seen, I think it might have been Jaws, the first one, or Ghostbusters, one of those two. It's just something that would be playing. My father would put on, and then when you're a kid, you're jumping around from room to room. They're on, and not. I couldn't give 2 hours of attention as a kid,
right.
but at some point, you eventually give a few more minutes to it, and then you see a shark, and you go, "What the hell is that? What world am I in where this thing is out there? What? It's at the beach." Little stuff like that caught my attention, just staying on the TV screen a bit longer as opposed to hopping around. But I gotta say that actually, even though I saw Jaws, I think he put Jaws 4 on first, and that was just again, it's one of the first movies I've ever seen at home. And then you just see the shark that looks angry, and as a kid, I couldn't tell a fake shark from a real one, really. And I was just like, "Holy crap, is that what it's like?" And then that movie had more shark in it in terms of what you could see than the first one. So to me, that was like, oh my gosh, this is a really good one. I had no idea what would make a good movie. Did you know? I mean, like that's the thing for you. Again, you hadn't seen many films as a kid, kind of at a younger age. But did you know what was a good movie? At what age do you think you were able to determine? Okay, this movie is good compared to this bad movie over here.
I mean, I still don't know. And honestly, like for the longest time, if I see a movie in the theaters, I can tell you the first bad, absolutely bad movie that I saw in theaters, like just
That you
awful,
knew, you
that I
just like
knew.
minute by minute.
Yeah, and
What
it was
was
The
it?
Island of Dr. Moreau. 100%. That was bad. Batman and Robin was bad. Um, those were
Same year.
yeah,
No, no, I'm sorry, not same year. '96 was Island of Dr. Moreau.
okay. Well, but those are just distinctly because I think there's a period in your life where you're seeing movies and there you just generally like whatever you see. Like you're kind of
Right,
maybe a kid. And I guess for me at that moment, that was when it was bad because also like a lot of movies, when you get older, because those were both around our high school times, you kind of go out to see movies because whatever, it's something to do with your friends.
right,
Before then, like movies were more or less vetted. Like it was your brother had to take you to it, and if it didn't look good, like he wasn't going to waste his time taking you a movie that he didn't want to see. At least my brother. So I
right.
like you had like the filter, so you weren't seeing a lot of bad things. So perhaps that was my experience. And finally, choosing movies to see with your friends, you just make bad choices.
Right. And I think that for me, at least, when I'm thinking about it in terms of my journey to going, okay, see my first movie. I can't tell if it's good or bad. I just know if it captures my attention to at some point determining if it's good or not. Thinking on your own on that front. Like, I think that the easiest way to get to that point, to shorten that cycle, is to, okay, for instance, I watched Jaws the Revenge, from the first movies I've ever seen. Today, one of the most horrible, like one of the worst movies ever made, technically. And at that age, however it was like 4 or 5, like I was like, this movie. I want to watch it again. And I couldn't tell that it was bad. But it's like I think that the more you see more movies, just more higher volume. Like for instance, I was too young to do this, but if you watch Jaws: The Revenge on Monday, then on Tuesday you watch The Shawshank Redemption. Well, then you can go, okay, now I can tell which one is better. And so the more you see the good movies, the more the bad movies wash away. The more you can kind of go, okay, well, narratively, to some degree, it'll seep in that goes, okay, this movie makes more sense. I'm getting more out of this, an emotional experience or whatever it would be, than the other film. I just think that if you had more, it's juxtaposition. You have more good movies in the pile than the bad, and then they'll end up separating themselves. And you can just kind of tell through the narrative, through the performances, through the direction, kind of what makes more sense. I think some movies would be tougher. Like, I'm trying to think, like if I went to like the first movie on IMDb that most people rank as the best film, which is The Shawshank Redemption. But actually, now that I think of that, if I watched Jaws 4 as a kid and then watched Citizen Kane, I probably wouldn't be able to tell as much of Citizen Kane. But yeah, I think that the more you throw good movies in the pile, and with as well as with the bad, they'll just separate themselves. Do you think? Do you agree with that? I don't know. I just thought about that right now.
Well, that's an interesting point, and I think it's going to be one of the first instances where you and I might diverge a little bit in terms of our taste or our experience. And
Well, they
it's
are
also
different, very different tastes. Yes.
right, and it's also a PSA for listeners. I'm going to come across as a snob, but trust me, I like a lot of trash movies, and I don't have the same filter or the same taste as you. So I will equally like. I'd like to think that I recognize what a good movie is and what a good performance and good direction is, but also, if a movie tickles me the right way, or if the movie just has something that I respond to, I will like that movie, and I will like it hard. So like,
And I think
yeah,
Oh no, I was just gonna say, and I think that the reasons for why you even like those movies, like even the ones that maybe most people consider bad or whatever, they're fascinating. The reasons that you have, and what we've learned is that they have been so fascinating, so exciting to listen to.
yeah, and I just think there's going to be things that I respond well to, and if you're able to kind of like penetrate my screen, so to speak, then I will consider that a good movie. Or I might admit that it's not a good movie, but I will tell you that like I like it very much, and there are myriad reasons as to why that could be, and we'll explore some of them with particular movies.
Right. Yeah. And like as you say, you might think that some would perceive you as a snob or whatever. I don't know. I'm always more fascinated, like I said, to the reasons why you do like something, why you don't, and we disagree a lot, and that's always fascinating for me from the perspective that I come from. Yes, like I said, I'm a movie enthusiast, but I go into every movie like, yeah, I want to enjoy it, but I do get disappointed where like some movies that many people love, many like. We talk about a few of them already, in the next few episodes. But like, okay, I'll give an example that we haven't talked about. I'm not sure we will talk about, which is Titanic. Like, you go into a movie here. I think the thing is, it's always so fascinating on when you watch a film. So, like, in other words, if Titanic came out and there's been weeks worth of people saying, "Oh, you've got to see it. It's the best film of the year. It's all this." You've got so much hype behind it that it almost seems just like you're setting yourself up for disappointment. And for more, I think that happens more often than not. I know that I've done that with you. I've hyped up a film, recommended it to you, and then now you're going in expecting it to be the best film of the year, and your expectations are so high that the movie just can't even reach it because I just totally oversold it. And I feel like I've gotten that, of course, but I try not to. I think for me, as you know, when prior to the pandemic, I was always like, all right, I'm going to watch the movie, not opening day, the night before, for crying out loud. I want to go in there to see what is this movie about before the word of mouth hits and hypes things up or doesn't, or whatever it would be. So again, I go in as an enthusiast wanting to love the film, but I do get disappointed where after I watch the 2 hours of the movie and I go, why didn't that strike with me? Why didn't that work? It's more of, and we'll dive into that in the next few episodes and such like that with those films that have disappointed. But that's, I guess, where I'm coming from when I watch. Before I go into every movie, I'm like, all right, I hope I hope it's going to be something special. I hope it's going to knock me off my seat. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. So that's I think that covers it to some degree in terms of where we're coming from here. I'm the enthusiast.
I'm along
Movies
for the
are
ride. That's
yeah.
basically it.
Right. And challenging you, because I always have, like, when we talked about watching movies prior to the pandemic, and we will continue to do so, remotely. But I put movies on the queue where I'm like, I know Harry might like this one, and I've got a good batting average, I think, because of course I know kind of like what your tastes are, and they are different from mine. But I go, oh, that's interesting. Let's see what he says about this. But I think it's the most fun I find when we disagree on a film, and that's where the real fireworks fly.
We come to terrible blows, and I think there's one or two episodes that we're probably not going to release, just
Right.
because we're not comfortable with the
No,
content.
we're gonna unleash them. They're a lot of fun. But some of them will be very very fascinating. It'll almost be like some of them will be incoherent to some degree, but they'll be a ball. But I think that, one thing, of course, let's mention is that we are going to be rolling out the episodes. We're going to be starting from the very first episodes that we've done, which were recorded back in June of 2020. As we're speaking right now, it's October 2020 when we finally found the name of the podcast to introduce ourselves. So yes, you will hear news from what things were like back then. It's like a vault of
It's a
recordings that
time
we have that we're
capsule.
unleashing. Yeah, it's a time capsule and all that stuff. So it'll be fascinating, and eventually we'll catch up.
You
But
should
yeah,
digitally alter them so they sound crackly like old time radio and stuff.
exactly. Yes.
Transmissions from like deep back in the past of June 2020.
Right. I
Yeah.
know, right? We were talking about things that had happened back decades ago or something. But yeah, so you'll be getting those, and eventually they'll catch up. But the key thing is we got a ton of content for you. It's gonna be exciting. Can't wait for you to be along with the ride with us. And I think the one thing that we do want to talk about before we move into the very first official take review, if you'll call it that, is to talk about what we've been watching. It's October 2020 now. Before we dive into the June 2020 episode, but yeah, what have you been watching there, Harry?
So actually, it's very quote unquote topical because it was just released. I recently watched On the Rocks by Sofia Coppola.
Now, not The Rock, but On the Rocks.
On the Rocks, although we did cover The Rock.
Coming
And
soon,
yeah,
very
I'd
soon.
like to do like a little bit of a show and tell because I know you haven't seen it. I don't know
Yes,
if it's on your must
it
see or
is.
to see list. Um,
Depending
but
upon what your
yes,
take is.
right. So there are a couple of Sofia Coppola movies that I've seen, and generally I have liked what I've seen. I really really enjoyed Lost in Translation when I first saw it. Every now and then I will watch it, and I still feel like it holds up. And On the Rocks, to me, the reason why I watched it was because it's kind of being sold as like a follow up. It's Lost in Translation in New York,
Mm.
and obviously a bunch of things near and dear to my heart there. And it's got Bill Murray, and I like Rashida Jones as well, so I was
Mm.
definitely interested.
So you went
And
in with an open mind, like you didn't go into it going, are we trying to get to Lost and are we trying to recreate that magic? You weren't thinking it you weren't coming from a different angle there. You were very open minded to this.
I went in very cautious,
Oh,
and
okay.
yeah, I went in cautious because I don't think you can capture lightning in a bottle, and certainly not a second time. Um, but our Apple Plus or Apple TV, free year subscription is kind of coming to an end, and it's really the only thing I've ever watched on it. So I felt like I had to justify get that free subscription, get my money's worth out of it.
Okay.
And I have to say, it wasn't particularly good. I can't recommend it. I think everyone did a great job. The atmosphere was what I had wanted. A lot of what I talk about and what I like is the atmosphere of movies. It does capture that to some degree. It gives you that insular feeling of just like that midnight world of the city and just hanging around and going in and out of bars or going in and out of places and hitting the streets. And I really like that feeling. And I think Lost in Translation captures it. Bored to Death does a really good job of that. And I like it because it kind of hits close to home. Like I think about all the times that I've been out, either with you or with other friends, you know, in and out of the city, doing that kind of stuff, just hanging out, and just sitting at a table and just like drinking and talking. And so I thought that was really cool. I think Sofia Coppola is really good at crafting these great believable scenes where people are just sitting at a table with vacant stares. Sometimes they're not even looking at each other. Sometimes they're just sitting side by side from each other. And I do like that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
What's interesting to me is if you take Lost in Translation, and Bill Murray was great in it, and it was kind of where his star started to rise again, where that was when he started to become the Bill Murray that he is now. So when you
Right.
fast forward to this movie, you can tell he's kind of sprinkled throughout the movie almost like a treat or something magical, whereas he was in, a good chunk of the movie in Lost in Translation. I mean, he was basically one of the main, he was the main character. Here he's almost like he's trotted out to some degree as like a
Hmm.
pleaser. And I think he
Okay.
does a great job. But it is a different kind of world now where it's like post Bill Murray is like the hipster, like God, like God of all hipsters or God to hipsters. Rashida Jones is good. I think she's always very, she does a good job of being somewhat deadpan or at least, conveying these truly like palpable emotions. And I think she did a good job in the movie. But again, that last act takes a kind of a weird turn. It wasn't what I had wanted. The ending is you're kind of just left somewhat unsatisfied. There's a really good scene at the, towards the very end that I liked with Rashida Jones and Bill Murray, kind of when they, butt heads. And I thought that
Hmm.
was really good. And I started to understand more what's really under the surface and what the main point of the movie was. But at the same time, I can't recommend it. So maybe if you ever check it
Okay.
out, we can get back, throw the cans on and kind of just talk
We'll
about it.
commit a full episode too.
Right.
Sounds good. If we bounce to it, the movie I watched this week, which took a while because we're in New York over here, and took a while for the theaters. They're not open in Manhattan, but out in Long Island, and there's theaters in Jersey as well. Able to finally see Tenet. And it's been months. I think that, like I mentioned, I don't like hearing the word of mouth, but was a little bit tough once it was finally released and the word came out that people were underwhelmed by Tenet. That they found it. I think that I didn't read any reviews because I didn't want to get anything spoiled. I didn't even watch the last trailer that they had. I'm glad I didn't, because then I have watched it after I watched the film and it does spoil quite a bit. But the word that I got going into it, and that it simmered after for like a month or so, was that it's very detached. Like there's no emotional investment in the characters, and that it's hard to understand. I know I heard this score was drowning out some of the dialogue. Yeah, people were there's very mixed reviews on the film. So I went in going, okay, this isn't anything great. So my expectations are very low. So I went into it like that, knowing that, and then I get, maybe it's because I expected the detachment already. I expected it wouldn't be as lucid or over. I found, as you know, we watched Inception together in theaters, but it was more like, well, Inception explained every step, there's so much exposition there that I go, okay, this movie might not have that. Now this movie does have that, but not to the degree. Not that you don't have as much hand holding as Inception did have, and a lot of audiences I feel are like, okay, it's a Nolan film. I'm gonna get the hand holding, and he didn't really do that all the way here. It's still there to some degree, but it's like at some point, it's like you're in the water and you got to keep your head above water, and it's kind of tough because at some point you might drown, and that's what going along with this movie is like. And I kind of really enjoyed that. And I gotta say, and I know we haven't discussed this filmmaker too much, but I did feel that sense of like that David Lynch kind of quality of like, Lynch is gonna throw you in the deep end, and you're just gonna get a piece of the pie. You're not gonna get the whole thing. But he's mapped everything out. He knows this whole world more than anything. You're just going to get a sliver of it. And I felt like, Nolan gives more than a sliver, but he's not going to, it's like, he even says in the movie at one point, he's like, you don't have to fully understand it, just feel it. That's his way of communicating almost too overtly to the audience. Just go along for the ride. It's going to be a rush. The pieces are there. It's not going to be spelled out for you. Otherwise, this movie could be like 4 hours long. But it worked on me. I just had a ball, and I think that subconsciously, even going to some of these Nolan films, I got used to that third act. Like this third, it goes a little bit longer than it should, and I get worn down. I felt that way with the third act in Inception. I felt like that within The Dark Knight Rises. Definitely, I fell off the boat with Interstellar. Dunkirk, I think, is great. It didn't do that. Dunkirk was a lean, under 2 hour film that didn't go that far. I think that's one of the reasons why it works. Also, and this movie does have that to a bit. It does. It's a 2.5 hour long movie, and I felt that third act weight, but it wasn't as much. I was more consistently engaged with the movie. Maybe it was that excitement of trying to keep up with it, and even when the score is drowning out the dialogue. But I love John David Washington as this role as the protagonist. It doesn't have. He's not a main character where he's got like the ex that he has emotionally connected to, and he's got to deal with this from his past. No, and I kind of love that about this film. It is detached. It does have that. It's not giving you that whole he's got this romance thing or whatever it is. And there's a little bit of that, but not too much. But nothing too much of like what Inception had done or Interstellar had done, where I don't think it did work with balancing the emotion with the exposition and everything like that in Interstellar with what it was trying to achieve. Here, Nolan's like, all right, I'm not even going to go down that path. It is going to be these are the characters here. These are the players. This is the journey, the experience I want you to go on, and it totally worked on me. As time's gone on since I've seen it, I do want to watch it again. But yeah, I just loved it. I feel like. And I thought about it before. I'm like, well, I know, like you're just talking about, like we just talked about recommending Sofia Coppola films. But am I going to recommend Tenet to other people that are going in expecting to be having their hands held, like to expecting to have the movie be lucid? To those people, I'd probably say, no, this movie might not be for you. You're going to lose it along the way, most likely. You might have to watch it a second, third time to fully understand it. I still don't fully understand it, but I want to watch it that second time. I kind of love that feeling in many ways of like, you've got the director, the leader of this ship. He knows that he's got this whole world covered. You're on this journey. You might not be able to keep up, but you're going to have a ball either way. And at least I did. And I can imagine some people might be bored too. I don't think that you would. For some degree, I have a feeling like you might really like it. I think it's a 50-50 chance. But, if you like it, you'll really like it. If not, you probably won't be on board. But yeah, man, I'm still surprised on how much the film worked for me. I think I told you that I went back to listen to the score, which sounds like a bunch of loose screws in a toolbox that's being tossed around in the back of a truck, that's swerving around all over the place, but I still loved it. Yeah, man, I was so on board. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it afterwards. Yeah, I'm trying not to spoil anything, obviously, but I do want to say I think John David Washington, for the role that he was given, I think he did a great job. I think Kenneth Branagh, he played this great, heavy, over-the-top kind of Russian accent kind of a thing. I love what he was doing. You had a fantastic antagonist there going up against the protagonist, and everything else in the world that Nolan creates, I was all on board. And yeah, I'm still surprised, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it again. When it's on Blu-ray. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I know how you feel about Nolan. You love some of his films, like The Prestige, but you also don't like a good portion of his films. But I gotta say, if you do like, it does have a little bit of those Lynchian qualities to it. I don't want to give it that credit. That's me kind of forcing a square peg into a round hole by saying that. But yeah, I think you might like it more. Yeah, but again, if I oversell it, you're going to be underwhelmed. So I will speak no further about that.
I'm sure
Do you have anything to say about that?
I've got nothing to say, and I have a lot to say about Nolan. But again, let's save that for when we can talk.
When we bounce to him, when we bounce to Nolan, we'll talk. We'll go in deep on his films and which films will we choose. We'll see if we get there. All right, that's kind of it. Let's dive right into our first episode, which will be a film starring Nicolas Cage. So we hope you enjoy, taking you back to June of 2020.
Yeah, and we hope you enjoy our little shows, and that you'll join us for more of them.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mike here.
This is Harry. Today we're diving right into Con Air, June 6, 1997.
That's a great, it's a year after The Rock came out. And I got to say, as someone who loved The Rock, I was really excited to see what is Nicolas Cage, what is he going to bring us today on this great day? Like, can you top The Rock? The reviews said no.
Well, I'm going to say a resounding no, but also I think the year is important because there's such a different cadence to these movies in the 90s than the 80s, and it's just night and day. And we'll talk a little bit more about that maybe towards the end, because we'll definitely be going a bit play by play through the movie. But that to me is really the linchpin about why Con Air doesn't succeed.
When I think of the movies, the action movies leading up to that, I think even in the early 90s, there was The Hunt for Red October. There was...
Is that an action movie? That's not an action movie.
Might have been. I haven't seen it. No, I'm kidding. Might have. No, you know what? It was Crimson Tide was another... All right, so I'm thinking of Bruckheimer. Actually, Bruckheimer didn't do Hunt for Red October. My mistake. He did Crimson Tide with Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer. Those were the two producers on that movie. They did Bad Boys, which came out the month before the Crimson Tide. So two Bruckheimer movies in 2 months. That's crazy. April 95 and then May of 95.
The hardest working man in show business.
And then The Rock in June of 96, and then leading up to Con Air of June of 97. So yeah, where should we begin?
Well, why don't we start with the beginning?
Okay.
I think that's a great way to start. And immediately just I'm watching this movie, you know, we watched it together.
Right.
And you know, it's such a quintessential, you know, movie made in the 90s. They couldn't get Julia Roberts, so they got, you know, that one actress. I think it's
Monica Potter, who went on to do Saw and Head Over Heels with Freddie Prinze Jr.
And she did a fine job, but they clearly cast her because they wanted someone who looked like Julia Roberts.
You needed a female in this movie. That's the one thing this movie was lacking.
Well, maybe not the one thing. So Nick Cage, he's honorably discharged. They make it an important point to mention that. They really want to drive home. This is a good guy, you know, man of honor. He's, you know, he served his country and now he's back. And the first thing that he does is he gets into a fight with a bunch of drunks, you know, to defend his wife, which of course makes sense. And he ends up accidentally killing one. Mm-hmm. And by the way that he kills the guy is fantastic. So actually, that's something that I very much like about this movie. There's really two ways that people can get killed that is constantly talked about on the playground. And one is getting like a line drive right into your chest and just going into immediate and fatal cardiac arrest. Mm-hmm. And the other is having your nose cartilage pushed up into your brain, which is what he does. It's a great way to accidentally murder someone. That's what happens. And he gets shipped off to jail. It's a very efficient, economical beginning for sure, but it's also stupid.
Well, how else would you want it? Like, for us to get to where this movie's going, it is very efficient. I mean, you get that taken care of. I think the 2-minute mark. We didn't even hit the 2-minute mark in the movie for this to happen. So you got there. Like, what else are you expecting?
Because the movie is trying to make you sympathize with this character, and he's a moron. Like, if he's that deadly, but yet he's not that in control of his own skills. Like, he could easily kill his wife one day. Who knows? Like, he doesn't know his own strength. He's just like, he doesn't know his own combat prowess, where he's just like unconsciously, like his just body's moving automatically, just dispatching these drunks and killing a guy.
So in your, like, when you come across this scene so early on in the film, like, we didn't even get to the main titles. Are you jumping off? Are you going, you can't be on board this movie? Or do you go...
So at the risk of sounding like an absolute jerk, I'm just going to say, like, I'm not expecting anything from this movie. Mm-hmm. So I'm just like, okay, this is how they're taking me from point A to point B. This is how they're going to get me on to make me bored Con Air.
Okay.
This is my ticket to Con Air. So, like, okay, so he goes to prison, right? Mm-hmm. And here's the thing about that. The jail didn't really seem that bad. You know, he was just kind of hanging out. He couldn't see his wife or his newborn daughter, and obviously that sucks. But, you know, he's just reading books. He's learning Spanish. He's learning origami, of which I do want to mention, I didn't understand why they put that in there, because he didn't use either of those skills in the movie. And usually when a movie does that, when they make it a point to show you what he's been up to, it usually comes back later. And I'm not saying you have to do it, but for a movie this kind of simplistic, I was surprised that he didn't use either skill to kind of get him out of the jam in the movie.
Well, that's funny, because having watched this movie several times, well, we all watched it with our friends on this kind of like teleconference while we were watching the movie simultaneously. You had mentioned at that moment, while he's in jail doing all those push-ups, getting that book of how to learn Spanish and the origami, you said, oh, you're going to see this callback. This is going to pay off at some point. And I said, no, don't get your hopes up. I literally had to go, wait, that doesn't at all.
It's a movie that doesn't really pay you back.
Well, they could have been I got to bring this up, is they could have been cut scenes that were put back into the movie in an extended edition of the film that was released in 2006 that
I'm not
included
going
8
back.
extra minutes. No, you're right. You're 100%
Back,
right.
9 years later to see when he uses Spanish.
Con Air Redux. Like the final cut that includes movie. Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm trying to, and I had to actually recall, I think the Spanish thing, I'm like, wait, did he not have to use that on the plane to speak to someone? I might have, and I
could have,
through.
because there were points where he could have with Johnny 23 or whatever that guy's name was. Like, that was there, and perhaps you're right. Maybe it didn't make the final cut, but if that didn't make the final cut, then they shouldn't have shown him doing that stuff. Like, seeing him exercise and seeing him write letters to his daughter, I get the sense of what he's doing in prison.
Right. Yeah, but you know what? That's the thing that I gotta say. When I first watched Con Air, and listen, I didn't have the reaction you did when that involuntary manslaughter kind of hit in with the first 2 minutes of the movie. But I did when the other character, I think the guy, the bartender, comes down. I was like, "Poe, he's dead." I was like, "Wow, he went there." Like, you're killing the guy off right in the first 2 minutes, and then as soon as he's in prison doing his push-ups, getting working with the origami, you got that voiceover. The exchanges he has with his daughter as he's writing her in prison. So immediately, as an audience member, you're like, all right, the guy killed someone within the first 2 minutes, but he's got a daughter, and this is how he's kind of you're going to see how he's going to redeem himself in the eyes of the viewer, I guess, starting off from the very beginning of the movie. But that didn't work on you, I take it.
I didn't think he needed redeeming. I clearly saw that it was an accidental death. I didn't really have a problem with him killing that guy. I mean, of course, it's terrible.
It's just that he's stupid.
I'm sure that character's family would think otherwise, but it was just a tool.
Yeah.
They reached into the filmmaking toolbox. Like, we need to get this guy into jail. He's got to be there for a long time because you really need to establish those stakes. So the only way he's going to go to jail for a long time is if he kills someone. So how can we do it in a way where you don't think he's a terrible person? Right. And so it was just the most simplest way to solve the problem.
And usually when looking at a movie, and kind of how I kind of evaluate it, at least from my perspective, I go, well, what is this movie trying to achieve? And for me, again, I've seen it way back around the time of its release, but I thought, the ads already the title of the movie already kind of gave you a hint in terms of what is this movie looking to achieve. It's not setting that bar very high. So for me, I go, all right, let's see where this narrative is going to take us. And like you kind of said, that prison, didn't look too bad within his cell. He had a good buddy. He had a great relationship with Michael T. Wilson, who was in Forrest Gump. He was Bubba.
Right. Yeah, great cellmate. When people were rioting, he was just kind of keeping his head down. Like, I got the sense that it wasn't terrible. I mean, prison. See, that's the other problem that I have. If you're gonna put someone in prison for 10 years, it's such a cheat to just kind of have him more or less be the same person. Like prison does things to a person for 10 years.
He didn't get any. What? Is there anything he's gonna be tortured by after leaving prison? Like, was there?
So to just use it as a way, to just use it as a foundation for another story, I don't know. I just, I don't appreciate that.
Really? I go, all right, you're gonna have him being tortured. Like imagine the first 2 minutes it's that, then after the credits he's just scarred by some of the things that he's seen in prison. Like, where do you go with that tone? So I don't know. I see where this movie's going. I see it's aiming low. I gotta say, some elements of this, of course, are stupid right off the bat. But I'm like, let's just see where this goes. And
let's keep going with it, and we'll see where it goes.
So this is 8 years he's been in prison, and he's been communicating with his daughter through the letters and such, and it's all hyping up to this July 14th. I think it's the 14th. How do I not remember this? Because this has been kind of quoted quite a bit since in memes. So yeah, I think July 14th is the day that he's going to be released, and it's going to be boarding a flight to Alabama on board a plane called the Jailbird, which is a Fairchild C-123 provider. I'm reading this all off of Wikipedia, so I'm giving you a little bit of background here. There's no way in hell I'd remember all these details from the movie.
You could have been a
just
big
washes over
buff.
you after you watch it. I didn't watch this movie enough to remember all these details. But he also, Michael D. Williams' character, he's a diabetic. They established that this is going to be something that they're going to be having to call back to later on in the movie, because he's going to be on that same flight with Nicolas Cage's character, and yeah, basically they're both going to be on their way on this flight. There's this great generous hug they both give each other because Nicolas Cage is going to be out, and then you're introduced to the U.S. Marshal, played by John Cusack, in the role of Vince Larkin. Now, what was your initial take of John Cusack? Because they immediately zoom in on his feet. I think one of the first few seconds you see him.
Oh yeah, he's wearing like those Birkenstocks or like those sandals, and that's just kind of shorthand to try to communicate to the audience that he's like, yeah, maybe he's like a little too liberal for this crowd, or he's in the wrong line of work. And I mean, my first impression was that he clearly just got his suit from David Byrne. Like, it's just 15 sizes too big, and just, you got that big
very
billowy like dress shirt tucked in. It's just, I couldn't get over that, and I still can't. It still keeps me up at night.
See, I guess that was the 90s. It was all kind of loose and everything like that. But I think this actually came out months after Grosse Pointe Blank. So, because Grosse Pointe Blank came out in April of 1997, and he wasn't wearing those suits that loose kind of in that movie. So you got a point there. His character's approached by DEA agents, and this is where all the tension comes in. This is where, you got the guy from Star Trek as one of the characters. Again, I haven't really watched it, but the TV show, I think one of them, I forgot. I'm not sure which one that was.
I have to say, I wrote a note specifically because I was very impressed by that guy's head.
Oh, that's right.
His head was like the size of like an 8-year-old's torso. It was gigantic.
It's great.
It was really good. Like, it was gigantic.
It's fantastic, and he's a great character actor and like that. So he's great to kind of be that kind of adversary to some degree for John Cusack, and basically you got one officer, one of the agents is planning to go undercover, on that plane to get some more information from this drug lord. He's about to be picked up and wrapped because not all the inmates are getting released. Like Nicolas Cage,
right.
They're all getting transferred to a new supermax prison, and then you get introduced to all these crazy characters who have really catchy
I want to
names.
get into that. I am chomping at the bit. I have to just completely talk over you because I want you to tell me what you think of these characters, this rogues gallery. These are the supposedly some of the worst criminals in America, and I want you to kind of give me your impression of these folks.
Well, I gotta say, the one I thought that would have had more screen time, and I'm very disappointed didn't, was Ving Rhames as Diamond Dog. Mm-hmm. I think he was heavily in the ads a bit. I'm trying to remember, but I would have thought after Pulp Fiction, and he was also in Kiss of Death with Nicolas Cage, they came out the year before. I would have thought that he would have had a big meteor role in the movie, but his presence was still great in the movie. He was very jovial, actually, at some times. So Diamond Dog played
good Bowie reference right there, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. But then the big guy. Actually, before we get to the big guy here, we got to talk about a few of them. One is Johnny 23, played by Danny Trejo.
And isn't it wonderful to see him and his chest tattoo the way it was meant to be seen before he got all saggy and he was still rather young. He was probably 50 in this movie.
You know how old he is today?
How old is he today?
Okay, Fred Willard passed away a few days ago. He was 86.
86, right.
Danny Trejo today is 76.
Wow, okay.
So I'm just surprised. I thought he was, again, I didn't think he was kind of getting up there, 76, but yeah, I guess you're right. He was in his 50s there, and this is right after he did Desperado.
Right.
Actually he was in Heat as well, a movie you haven't seen that's on our queue for you to finally see because it's a crime that you haven't. But Danny Trejo playing a character that is very uncomfortable in this movie.
Right.
And we got to say the writer on this movie was Scott Rosenberg, and one of the also quick note is that one of the other writers, actually, I think it was just a doctor on this movie, was none other than J.J. Abrams. Oh. So we don't know what he contributed specifically to this movie, but probably something in line with the ending. But basically, yeah. So you got to have these characters here that are going to provide that weight to go. Okay, Nicolas Cage is on this flight with some real evil people. So in addition to Ving Rhames and Danny Trejo, we've also got the most appropriate would be Dave Chappelle. I guess
Dave Chappelle, the arsonist. Yes.
That's right. Introduced to him. This is before Half Baked came out. But he's the humor. This is where you get a little bit of levity here on this flight, a lot of entertainment on the front on his front. I'm trying to think. You've also got. I got to say, we got to cut to the biggest one at this point is of course John Malkovich as Cyrus the Virus, and again, like I mentioned before, this is a year after The Rock, where you had a somewhat sympathetic kind of. He wasn't even really a villain played by Ed Harris,
Right.
but he kind of provided a little bit of weight, an emotional weight to that movie as well. But here in Con Air, no, you don't have that. You've gotten John Malkovich going
You
for
have
it.
like
What-
R-rated Scooby-Doo villains. Like they all suck, and they're all very they're just all half-hearted characters. Like, let's go straight to Cyrus the Virus. He's smart and he's like a nihilist, and like those are his two like superpowers, for lack of a better term. And like I hate when they do that. Like someone is so smart that they can achieve anything and their plans are always going to work. Like he's not strong, it just it's just all through convenience sake how these plans work and how they succeed.
Yeah, but I think that as they're as you're getting this showcase of these villains, I go, okay, again, we're fleshing out where this movie is going, and like again, especially you've gotten the weight of the evil characters there that do seem kind of out of tone with where the movie's going, but you've got that John Malkovich character, like you're saying, doesn't look like he can really, can he, what is he gonna? He feels like how many times has his ass been kicked in prison? You'd think, like,
Exactly.
but
And like they're all paper thin. Like they're not interesting characters. Like he's supposed to be the most interesting one, and he's not.
But the weight is on Malkovich. It's like the screenwriter's like, okay, we got to get someone really that's going to provide some great weight to this specific character. That's you're going to bring that presence. That presence going to be there as if it doesn't have to be there within the text. It's going to show within the performance that this is not a guy to mess with. I have to say, I do know that who they were looking to cast in this role before Malkovich signed on board, Bruce Willis.
Huh.
Which again, we got to look at the movie for what's been made, but I do have the curiosity of like, what would this movie be like with Bruce Willis at that time, and how crazy, how far would he go out there in this role?
I don't think it would have been better. I don't think it would have
Yeah.
been better.
Well, I still think from my perspective, I'm like, all right, this movie's going for just pure entertainment. It's not going to be too much. We're not getting that necessarily that weight from like Ed Harris' character in The Rock, like I mentioned, but we've got Pinball played by Dave Chappelle to provide that humor to
It's
offset.
just a cartoon, and
Right. So,
Yeah,
so moving
yeah.
forward, you got there's a hijacking on board at some point that Pinball, played by Dave Chappelle, kind of like sparks right there, setting another inmate on fire. He's up in flames as that's the catalyst for where the inmates take control. He somehow, gets loose of his shackles and such. And at some point, yeah, all the inmates have got control of the plane. And at this point, this is where you go, all right, this is highly unlikely. This would never happen. So you're on board completely on how batshit crazy this movie is going to go, and just seeing how far it will go, or you're off. You're walking out. You turn the movie off. And for you, you did not. You did not say you're going to turn it off, but you're still going to see how it's going. But at this point, how do you feel?
I'm just kind of sitting and watching how it's all playing out, and
And isn't it
I
fun watching John Cusack freak out to notice that his plane that he made sure everything's kind of going to go well, but then he's got to hear, oh my God, like this is what's happened.
I didn't appreciate any of those scenes because you've seen them 100 times. You see the tension between the younger guy and the older guy, and the younger guy knows more, but the older guy refuses to listen to him, and they're going to do it his way. And then meanwhile, you're jumping back to what's going on in the plane, and it's just very just tired.
I think that Cusack adds a bit, especially at that time. This is someone who's coming. He grew up in the '80s, like doing Better Off Dead, all these kind of like high school, kind of like it's almost as if like would they have cast Matthew Broderick? Would he have been the first choice? I don't know, but he brings as much as he can to that role.
I guess I mean I can't criticize the acting or the performances. I think everyone basically said, "All right, we're gonna give it basically 100%." And Nicolas Cage, I feel like, gives 100% no matter what he does. Like if you paid him $10 to be at your birthday party. He would give you the same performance as he would for like a regular Hollywood movie. He was making like $1 million for whatever he makes on a movie.
Well, also
So
keep
I'm
in
not
mind, he
criticizing
just
the
won an
performances.
Oscar like just the year before. So the fact that he did The Rock after that immediately, I mean, he had already been filmed before he won the Oscar, but this being his first movie post-Oscar, he chose this movie, not another contender, not to really ride that wave to go for another serious drama. He chose Con Air. I love that about Nicolas Cage. That's what makes this guy such a. I'm always there for a Nicolas Cage movie as long as it's not the Red Box. Um, and I love the fact that he made this choice for this movie. And yes, not only does he bring it to this movie, Malkovich does, Ving Rhames does. Again, I wish a lot of the characters had a little bit more screen time there. And then Steve Buscemi comes in a little bit, and he's a bit restrained, but they're all bringing it. And in the way in which they've read the script, they know what this movie is, and they're going, okay, this is where we're going to take it, and they all bring it to what you're saying. But I think that that's what elevates this movie. I think that this movie, a lot of people, again, I haven't done a survey
You're saying
on
that this movie is elevated.
I think the performances elevate the material, absolutely. I mean, you're looking at this is a beast. This is a script that it's just like, it could have been written on a napkin, obviously.
It probably was.
Yeah. But then you got all these people going, hey, I'm on board, and let's see what we can do. Let's improvise. I mean, Dave Chappelle had actually said later on that all of his lines were completely improvised, so they let him roll with it. And, and he brings a lot to the movie, and it's all these specific different, and the casting was done right. And I have to say that, Nicolas Cage is not, they didn't bring Stallone in here where the spotlight would be on him as a Stallone character. They didn't. It's a little more evenly distributed. I can't say evenly because, like I said, some of the characters don't get the right screen time, the good amount of screen time. But still, I think that's what kind of works, because when I think of this movie, and I've seen it a few times to the point where I question why, because why would you choose this over The Rock and whatever it be, but we can go into that later. I think that it's all those different characters. So I love seeing Malkovich. I love seeing Ving Rhames. I love seeing all these other characters that kind of make this a crazy ride. Like, I'm on board. But okay,
the movie did not leave that impression on me, so I'm happy to hear that you enjoyed it.
And it's not going for an A+ 4-star action movie. It's high for like 3 stars at best, if it can hit that, or 3 out of 4 stars, I should say, or a B at best.
I would say, like, that's very lofty. It was a gimmick. Someone just came up with the title of the movie before they even wrote the script. Mm-hmm. And that was it. And then they're like, all right, well, wouldn't it be cool if like there's this plane that's hijacked, and hijacking movies are popular. Look at Speed. Like I want to capture some of that magic. And that's basically what they did. They wanted to, they had this concept, and then they wrote a movie around the concept. And it's clear, like, it just, the movie runs out of gas very early on. And I'm not going to jump ahead to the
completely
climax.
disagree. I completely disagree, because not only does it not run out of gas early on, it doubles down on the challenge of what you didn't expect from this movie. Because what is this? Well, first of all, we left off like the inmates have taken control of the plane, but then. Well, and of course, Nicolas Cage has got to figure out. He's like, hey, I got to go see my daughter. I don't want to be involved in this. And he's got his buddy that's, he's a diabetic there, and he's got to tend to him to make sure that he can't totally bolt at any chance he can. But they're taking things to the level in which they've got to make an inmate exchange, so land in Carson City, to bring on board new inmates. So now you've gotten a whole bunch of other villains that have been included. To kind of ramp things up a bit. So I don't think that it runs out of steam. I think that it kind of like it doubles down a little bit. And that's what I think at that point the plane is grounded and they're in the desert pretty much. And that's where we're introduced to Steve Buscemi's character, who's been a serial killer named Garland Green. And you don't know what the hell he's going to be up to. So how is this movie running out of steam where you just introduced Buscemi, you don't know what the hell's going to go on in his head. It can get like Silence of the Lambs up in the plane. So I'm like, no, I'm on board. I love how crazy this is kind of getting so far.
So I would say that I wouldn't pick this particular scene to say this is where the steam is run out.
It's gone. Oh, yeah.
But I will say that, so this movie continues to kind of borrow from you with no intention of ever paying you back.
You sure?
So you mentioned 2 things that I want to talk about. So the first thing is, so Nicolas Cage has an opportunity to actually get off at this prison exchange point. He can get off. He can walk away.
But
He remains, and it's quite clear before the stop that he doesn't really care what's going on. He wants to get back to his family.
no, he cares about his buddy.
Well, no, well,
Yeah.
I'll get to that. He doesn't really care that much because this hijacking will sort itself out or not, because at the end of the day, these guys just kind of want to escape and get out of jail. It's not really clear that they want to go out and commit more crime for the most part.
But you know that's going to happen.
Well, yeah, but then he wants to stick around for his buddy, which is admirable.
Right.
But let's actually take a step back. So he's in jail for 8 years. He hasn't seen his wife for 8 years. He's never really seen his daughter. Both of them have been waiting for them 8 years of their lives. The wife, probably like the best 8 years of her life, you know. And then he decides, like, no, I'm gonna risk everything. And the probability of him surviving or making it out of this alive is now very low. That he's stuck around. To me, that's deplorable. That does not make him a sympathetic character.
No, but the through line for the whole movie. Okay, yes, he's not, at first as an audience member you'd be like, oh, he's not that sympathetic in the first 2 minutes as we discussed, but then it's all about his daughter from that movement, every step of the way through this whole movie. Then you add that extra layer of his buddy who he chose
his buddy over his daughter, which I'm not saying his buddy.
But it's the heart. It's the heart of Nicolas Cage's character. It's in the right place. So you, as an audience member, you go, okay, we're on board. Obviously, if it wasn't for the script needed his buddy and to have this condition where that would anchor him on the plane, obviously.
Why couldn't his buddy get off at the first checkpoint again? Can you remind me, like, why they couldn't do that?
He wasn't scheduled because they think that. So he did this again. They worked on this.
Oh, they were thinking.
He did request. He said he was supposed to get off, but then Malkovich said no. They're expecting someone. You're shit out of luck. He basically said he's like no. The person they're not expecting is not you. So that's why he couldn't, but Nicolas Cage could, and he was going to go warn everyone, and of course that didn't go well. but he had that was it. I mean, Nicolas Cage was just expecting to go off and let everyone know, but that just did not work. And of course, you had all new inmates on board that plane, so now it's jam packed. It's things are not going well.
Let's talk about Buscemi now, because that's another thing
that's the tonal shift in the movie that really isn't, because again, like I said, we don't know what this guy is capable of, but then there's a scene where the plane is actually my mistake, actually. I thought they did pick up the new inmates, and then they took off, but then they landed in another location, Lerner Airport, that's right. And then when they're landed at this airport, I think they're going to take off in another plane, I believe. They're looking to transfer to another plane, but they got to get rid of the transponder. But the thing is that at this time, as they're off in this desert, as they're waiting to transfer, Buscemi goes off, and then of course there's a scene where he sees, I don't know how there's this little girl out there in the desert, and this but there's a scene
in a swimming pool,
right, in an empty swimming pool. But there's this slow, and it just literally stops the energy of the movie where you go, as an audience member, you go, where is this going? And the writer, the director, the filmmakers, they're toying with the audience. At some point you go, really, like, this was this is crazy, but now we're going in this direction here. Where is this headed? What was your take on that scene?
And arguably for no reason.
Yeah,
and so
I agree.
That baffles me. I don't understand why he's there, because
you could have done that a different way.
Do anything.
You could have had Buscemi go batshit crazy in a different. Go on. You there?
Well, I was just going to say, you would think he would be like the ace in the hole. Right?
Yeah.
So he's there. He's positioned to be this quiet but very crazy, very dangerous person. And then that's never activated. And then you have this weird scene with the girl in the pool, and it just doesn't work. It eats time away. It diverts your focus. It doesn't make sense.
Meanwhile, I think there's an action scene going on throughout all this, and it just cuts back to this scene where you go, okay, this is just slowing everything down. It's like when you finally got momentum on a bike, then you stop it in its tracks and you just slow it down quite a bit. As an audience member, you do feel that. Granted, there's suspense, but a very uncomfortable suspense, where it could have been done in a different way. I do agree that's not a moment that's always a scene where if I see it, I just go forward through it and get back to that crazy action where Nicolas Cage jumps through a window of a gas station as it explodes behind him. little stuff like that. So you got a nice action set piece going on there. Yeah, so basically they were looking to transfer over, but that plan didn't
Right.
work.
I will actually.
Yep.
I actually wanted to just go back for a second because there is one thing that I really liked about the movie, and that's when Nicolas Cage throws the dead body out of the plane after
Hmm.
writing a message on the shirt.
Right. Right, which was on Pinball. Oh no, he it was on them. It was on his body, and then he threw the body out of the plane and it hit the car.
Right, which
Right.
is amazing. That's fantastic. I also love how Nicolas Cage is willing to sacrifice probably a lot of lives to get this message out. Because who knows how many people have been killed?
Right. Yeah, 'cause he landed on a car of this older couple,
Yeah,
could have killed them, but he didn't know it was going to land there. So I mean, again, okay, there's that, but that was his one chance to send a message. Didn't work out as planned. So the high risks, and yes, it could have killed someone, but let's not shift the tone to something downbeat. Where this movie could have, that scene could have ended horribly.
right.
But
Well, I have to mention it because again, Nicolas Cage not always thinking.
right. Yeah. So that was kind of that was the use for Dave Chappelle. That was his exit from the film. Because I think he was trying to catch up with the plane at some point before it took off, and then he just kind of got caught there and got killed that way.
Right,
But anyway,
right,
going John Cusack's on the trail. He's basically trying to catch up with them, and he ends up at the same location at Lerner Airport. So again, there's this whole action set piece going on over there.
mhm,
Gunfire's out there. I'm not sure how you felt by this action. I thought it was okay. Sometimes I get numb by this type of action. I did get a little bit numb. Some of it's very repetitive, but Nicolas Cage is just kind of like, again, trying to. That's where he meets up with Cusack. That's where they kind of join forces, if you will. And Cusack already says at this confrontation, he's like, "I know all about you. You're just a good guy, always in the wrong time, always in the wrong place at the wrong time." So that's good. There we go. That was always there through a lot of other movies. We've seen that before, and Cusack has already known this obviously before by doing the research on everyone. And then I go, all right, I like these two characters. I like Cusack. I like Nicolas Cage's character. And okay, now we're gonna go up against these guys, and we're gonna see how is this gonna play out. Where are we going here? Then the plane takes off, and then of course there's some other nonsense kind of going on. But long story short, it's going off. It's taken off, but then it's basically got to. It ends up pretty much going to have to land in Vegas. You think that it's run out of steam at this point? You're not all on board where you're like, all right, they're going to land
I
this plane in
was
Vegas.
rendered exhausted by the set piece action scene.
So that last one,
It,
that was the one that really did it for you, that wore you out.
that would have been a fine enough conclusion for the most part. I found it to be a little confusing. People were jumping in and out of windows, and then like the
Oh,
people who were supposed to pick
let's
them
not
up
forget
escaped on like a Cessna.
Malkovich. Let's not forget Malkovich's plan to show everyone like this is what we're gonna do. This is our plan. So he takes crushed soda cans
Right.
and maps out basically like, this is what we're gonna do. This is our plan here. So they even had time for that before all the shit went down. Really, you
It
didn't
was just
again.
a long and drawn out, and like
Didn't
I'm not big on those huge explosions that are just there just for like eye candy. So by the time that's all said and done, I'm like, oh, the movie's still going on, and now we're landing in Vegas. Like, okay,
Okay. See, I liked a little bit of the style, like I mentioned with Malkovich, kind of working with the soda cans there to kind of give everyone to tell him his plan. I liked the style. I like the actor. Like the thing, this movie wouldn't work for me if you didn't have these great actors on board. So that would be kind of my that I think is another reason why this movie is working for me at this point is because you've gotten those great actors on board. Okay, but it didn't work for you. And then the plane does land in Vegas, and the propeller just kind of goes crazy. And then there's another kind of chase sequence on a fire truck. On a,
right. And I'm just shaking my head.
I kind of agree at
Just
that
at this
point.
point, I'm like,
I hear you at that point. At that point, I'm like, all right, now we're kind of being worn out by the action. I see they're taking it there. They're going full throttle, but like there's water in the hose.
yeah, there's water in the hose. There's all kinds of hijinks on the fire truck. But let me jump to what I did really like. I loved how Cyrus is killed by getting his head crushed by that like construction thing that keeps going up and down.
Right.
Like I believe
Like there
his
might as well have
body is,
been
like,
in this movie. There might as well have been a guillotine. Like this movie is so crazy. Like in
that.
Vegas,
Like,
there's a
that.
guillotine.
Yeah.
Right,
I like
go
that
on.
over the top kind of grisly execution. It leaves nothing to the imagination.
Right. Yeah. The wrong place, the wrong time, right there for him. It ends. It ends like that after all that long action sequence, and then of course, when things calm down for just a minute, John Cusack shakes Nicolas Cage's hands, thanks him for his work, and then conveniently, of course, Nicolas Cage's wife and child
Right.
is
Yeah.
there to greet him, as he has the rabbit, the bunny. Remember, like we
Yeah, he
forgot
had
that
the bunny
scene.
that he had that with him. He was going to give it to his daughter because today is her birthday or something. The bunny's in the
Right.
gutter. It's disgusting and granulated. She doesn't want to take it, and then the mom's like kind of forcing her to. And it's just so awkward, and you're just like, wow, yeah.
But then there's a loving embrace right there with the wife, the kids there, and this great big hug. And the wife says, "By the way, I'm pregnant." No, of course,
Did she
it
say
did
that?
not.
I
No,
don't
I'm
remember
kidding. That
that.
does not say it. That would be very unfortunate. That would be an incredibly unfortunate ending for the movie. But that was basically, and then it just cut to black. But then you don't even get to the credits because then you find out what happened to Steve Buscemi's character because he's at the craps table, I believe, or he's playing blackjack in Vegas. And then you go, "Ooh, is this potential for
you're
a
supposed
sequel?"
to have like a right. Are you supposed to have like a big like laugh about that? Like he's a horrible like cannibal serial killer, but like he's really the only one who, besides maybe Nicolas Cage, who has a happy ending.
Right. Yeah. So you got that. He didn't go too crazy. Like apparently, I guess as an audience member, you kind of like him because he didn't at that scene with the girl in the.
Yeah.
She didn't. She was fine and all that. So they kind of worked out there. You end up kind of liking Buscemi's character, which is weird for the writer to want the audience members to feel for this character to some degree. Like, oh, look at this. He's off there and he's on his own. So it's just funny. And again, I think judge the movie as it is. You obviously didn't like it. I'm not sure if you were to rate this movie, what you would give it. But
Well, first I want to talk about the credits because I really enjoyed how they kind of had that retrospective like of all the characters kind of laughing, like
right, having a good
just kind
time.
of like we all had a lot of laughs during this movie, and it's good to see all these friendly faces, even though the majority of them are the titular cons,
Right.
who are all terrible people.
Right. But the thing is, I mean, they made this movie. I mean, they were out in the desert. There's all guys on this film, on this film. So making the film, there wasn't even a woman on set. So, and on top of it, like the movie, again, it's not in the movie. It's not even in the DVD. But initially, they wanted the plane to crash and land into the White House, and then basically, Garland Green, Buscemi's character, would be walking up the lawn. But obviously, that was just so stupid. Bruckheimer, I think, shot that idea down before they started filming. Obviously,
That's stupid.
But again, you go.
that's-
This is what they're aiming for. They're going that batshit crazy. This is like they've made another movie, White House Down, that's going batshit crazy, but doesn't work in my opinion. But this movie, I go, you got all the actors bringing it. You got the script. It's very thin. But I go, this was entertaining for 2 hours. But again, an hour later, you're not thinking about it. There's not much weight to it. It was just fun watching these characters, these actors all together, play together pretty much with guns for 2 hours. And yeah, for me, I enjoyed it. But it's not a great film. It's not one of the best action movies. It's not even one of the best action movies of the 90s, but it was just a fun ride for me. But for you, didn't work. Couldn't compare to The Rock, I take it.
Well, yeah, I don't want to get too much into The Rock because I have a full slate of thoughts about that.
We will
one.
talk heavily into The Rock.
We'll
yeah.
talk about that. The biggest problem for me, and I kind of alluded to it from the beginning of this conversation, and I'll end with it because it's really my final point.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a good action movie because it doesn't have a good action hero. Nicolas Cage he's not really on board with this. He's not committed. He doesn't want to do this. He's only doing it because he feels it's the right thing to do. And I can respect that as a motivation, right?
Okay.
But like every time he kills someone, it's an accident. Like, okay, at some point, like, you kind of have to like own it. So like when he kills that guy in the cargo hold, that was great. The guy gets impaled. Like I want my action hero to make a joke about that. I want him to kind of just own that, own the blood, own the violence, and get down to brass tacks.
Huh. I couldn't disagree with you more, and I'll tell you why. Well, first of all, one other thing that we forgot to mention, a scene where I'm still surprised that in this movie that we go this crazy, is that where Nicolas Cage, he doesn't have a gun. He's walking towards one of the inmates that does have a gun. That inmate shoots Nicolas Cage in his bicep, and he doesn't flinch at all, which is just like, wow, this is that kind of movie. Now, you mentioned a few things. Well, first of all, you mentioned that you don't think that Nicolas Cage wanted to do this. I think he totally wanted to do. First of all, I think that Nicolas Cage brings it to every performance. I'm not sure that this is a Nicolas Cage performance.
I'm sorry. I don't mean the actor.
In.
I mean the character.
The character doesn't. Oh, okay. So the character doesn't want to be there, obviously. So Nicolas Cage is playing that. But that's the point. I mean, Harrison Ford doesn't want to be the fugitive in The Fugitive. But
you can't compare
I'm throwing it out there. But the thing is still, you need that contrast. That only works. That conflict only works if his character, if that is there.
I don't think so, because when you have what's ostensibly a popcorn action movie, then let's go all the way.
With John Cusack,
I guess went all the way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just through it. So if I'm rooting for Nicolas Cage. What is his name? Cameron Poe or whatever.
Right.
Maybe. Yeah.
It's Cameron
if I'm rooting for Cameron, I want him to be that guy who's like, I don't want to worry about him. Everyone should be worried. I don't want to worry for him. All the other characters should be worried about him. If you think about your great action heroes, like your Stallones, your Schwarzeneggers, no one's worried about what's going to happen to them for the most part. You're kind of watching to see how they're going to handle each situation. And that doesn't happen here. And again, I'll even go back to the fact that the choices that he's making don't make sense to me, because he lived, 8 years. All he wants to do is go back to his family. And now he's going to throw that all away.
Well, a lot of action movies do kind of, like what you just mentioned in terms of I'm doing all this for his family. And in his mind, he rationalizes by saying, well, he's got his buddy, Michael T. Williams is up there. He's got to save him. So that's the reason why, obviously, as we discussed. But the thing is, there is that sympathy. Yes, these movies are made to sympathize with the protagonist. I think that, from what you're mentioning, it seemed like you might have wanted, John Wick to be this character and be on the plane, which I would love to see. I would love to see, even a Schwarzenegger and just as the commando on a plane like this. I would love to see that, but that movie seems like it would end quick. And if it didn't end quick, then you'd be like, well, this guy's not that good. So I
think as a writer, you can be really creative, but I think there's something that's more interesting to have that tension of you think that, I hate to kind of paraphrase the cliche from Watchmen, but the prisoners, you think that Nicolas Cage is trapped in that plane with the prisoners, but it's the other way around. And it's all about how Nicolas Cage is going to buy his time and wait for the opportunity to take care of these people. And that really doesn't happen. So for me, it's such a letdown.
So like Rorschach from Watchmen, you want there to be almost like a scene where he's like, I'm not in here with you, you're in here with me. And what you're describing, I would love to see that actually. Maybe they did make that movie, we just haven't seen it. But again, I just kind of go, I'm just trying to roll with you on this and kind of go, okay, but they're in this plane, especially considering the situation. I don't know the motivation. I don't know if the motivation would work. And again, like you said, okay, you need the strong writing to be there for the reason why that guy would be on this plane for so long, taking on these inmates and picking them off one by one in a very threatening fashion where everyone else is worried. Again, that contrast.
I was just going to say the solution is simple. You don't have the friend, because the motivation is to get to his family. So you just have to raise the stakes slightly, just enough to say he's got to get off this plane. He's got to land this plane, because they're not going to let him get out. And they should have done that early on. Look, you had mentioned once in our conversation, you can't review the movie that wasn't made. So I get that, but I can't help but see, these missed opportunities or just this weak premise.
Well, I see. I think that what you're describing is actually something that a lot of movies, especially in the '90s, that they have kind of rolled with, which is they focused on a sympathetic protagonist, like another movie. I was thinking of a plain movie, like with Executive Decision with Kurt Russell and Steven Seagal in there, which was another film that actually did. They really, as a test and focus on suspense throughout the whole movie. But the thing is, Bruckheimer at this time, to give you just an answer, and again, I would like to see the movie you're describing, but again, I'm all about this movie as well. Bruckheimer wanted to make movies where you did have that sympathetic protagonist, like Nicolas Cage in The Rock, like, even Bad Boys, as well as a lot of the movies in the '90s, Enemy of the State. So that's what he wanted to see, because I think that maybe in the '80s people gotten really worn out on those Schwarzenegger type characters, which is that just ran its course. We're just like, what can we do that's different? Let's do an action movie like The Rock, where you had Ed Harris, these great actors, as opposed to the buff Stallone, Schwarzenegger. I go, yeah, I don't want to see Schwarzenegger in the Con Air as his protagonist. Maybe it's good that we had this. I think that it is, and I'm glad that we did, because like I said, what stands out from the movie is not the script. It's those actors bringing it in this insane, batshit crazy movie. I'm glad The Rock didn't go totally down this route. It did a little bit, but it still reined in a bit, which is surprising for Michael Bay directing that. But again, that's why it works for me. I totally understand. I think you conveyed effectively why it doesn't work for you. And, you've always got your '80s movies with Schwarzenegger. And you know what? He was trying in the '90s. And my question to you is, this movie was released, a year after the movie I'm going to compare it to, which is The Eraser, which came out in June of '96. Did you see that movie? Because that's I think that's more like what you're describing in terms of what you might want. I'm not sure. I haven't seen that movie in a while. I didn't know if you saw it.
I didn't see Eraser, but I will say, so we've mentioned The Rock a bit because, back to back, both.
And imagine The
both
Rock.
June release dates.
Right.
And I'm just going to say I'm excited to talk about The Rock at another time, because I like The Rock. And I think The Rock is everything that's wrong about Con Air is right about The Rock. Both are pretty cheesy '90s action movies, but for me, The Rock succeeds where Con Air fails.
And I would love to see a remake of Con Air starring Dwayne The Rock Johnson as Cameron Poe. That's kind of where I take it. So I enjoyed it. I'm glad that, again, I'm glad we had this conversation. I'm trying to think, is there more fun that we can kind of debate about with this movie? But no, at best, this is a popcorn action movie. It works for you, it doesn't. It's not great. I know Ebert did say at the time, I think on a talk show on YouTube, he said, Con Air, it's a good movie. I'm like, no, it's not. As much as I like the movie, no, it's not really a good movie. You can't go out there and tell people that. I feel like, Roger, you can't do that. No, of course you can, but still, I just thought it was a lot of fun. But that's as far as it can go. Out of 4 stars, I'd give it 2.5, and that's still kind of being a bit generous, but still had fun. And that's what it was. So, anything else more you want to say about Con Air?
Nope, I've definitely talked everyone's ear off. But I will see everyone later.
Perfect. Well, on our next episode. See you guys then. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to not miss a single bounce.
We'll catch you next time, and don't forget to leave reviews on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever you listen to Movie Bounce.